Welcome back to Democracy Docket's 2024 Candidate Q&A series. I'm Matt Cohen, and today I'm talking to Washington Attorney General Bob Ferguson, who's running to be the governor of Washington. You've been Washington's Attorney General for more than a decade. This is your first time running for governor. Why now?
Well, the reason for right now is because we're facing some really serious challenges as a state. Public safety, an opioid epidemic, rising costs for groceries and housing. So we're facing serious challenges as a state. And I think what we need as a governor is someone who's a change agent, who's demonstrating ability to make change in places they've been in the past, to address those challenges, while at the same time, and equally importantly, protect our core freedoms. Freedom like reproductive freedom, freedom like the freedom to marry the person you love. And so that's what makes Washington a great place, is I think we're a state that upholds those kinds of values, at the same time leaning into progress, leaning into change, leaning into improving state government, and that's what motivates me to run for governor.
I'm glad you brought up reproductive freedom and protecting other people's freedom. I know during your time as AG, you formed the Civil Rights Division within the AG's office, which is one of the nation's strongest civil rights divisions in the country, fighting against discrimination. How will you continue that fight as governor of Washington? What are some of the biggest threats to the civil rights and protections of Washington residents?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you mentioning the Civil Rights Division in my office, which an incredible team. And just to be clear, when I became Attorney General 12 years ago, we were the largest law firm in the state of Washington. We have hundreds of attorneys and hundreds of professional staff. But if you called my office on my first day on the job with a civil rights complaint, we referred you somewhere else. Our office for decades had done no civil rights enforcement on behalf of the people, which made no sense to me. It kind of goes to the basis of your question. Hey, state government should be an advocate for all Washingtonians. So we created that Civil Rights Division. And that Civil Rights Division, to your point, is now, a true leader, not just here in Washington State, but nationally. It was my civil rights team that was the first team to challenge Donald Trump in court on the first Muslim travel ban. My office was the first office to challenge him. He signed that executive order on a Friday evening. My team worked all weekend. On Monday, we filed a lawsuit. And on Friday, we had national injunction stopping that first Muslim travel ban. That was my civil rights team. So it's important to have a team of advocates who stand up for everybody's rights. So I'm proud of what the team's done for farm workers and for communities all across our state. Now, as governor, it's a different role. So one thing I want to make sure I'm doing is making sure the AG's office is able to continue growing that civil rights division. I've been able to do it by prioritizing my budget, both even more resources from the state. In other words, I do it without general fund resources. I do it within my budget. But that team can and should grow. Believe me, if it was a bigger team, there's more cases they could bring on behalf of the people to uphold their rights. Also, number two, as a governor, there's simply our state budget, right? There's the work we do with all the state agencies to make sure we're doing everything we can as a state to make sure we're upholding the rights of all Washingtonians. And that's just something that's important to me personally. Being an advocate for civil rights is something that I've just cared deeply about. That's why we prioritize that in my office as Attorney General. And I'll certainly be taking that same mentality to being governor of Washington State.
Thanks for that answer. You in that answer you mentioned something that I was going to bring up a little bit later. Your office's litigation efforts against the Trump travel ban. That was not the only litigation that you filed against the Trump administration. Your office sued the administration, I believe, 97 times, and really sort of led the Democratic Attorney General's effort to push back against a lot of the harmful Trump policies. What did you learn from that litigation effort?
Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, that was a unusual time, right? I mean, if you told me when Donald Trump took office that we would end up being 99 lawsuits against Trump administration, I just would say, well, that's crazy. I mean, there won't be that many things to challenge, and we don't have the bandwidth to do that. We don't have the resource. Wouldn't have seemed possible. But obviously, Donald Trump's administration turned out to be a train wreck for our country, and his efforts to trample on the rights of Americans and Washingtonians, on our environment, reproductive freedom, the list goes on. It became very clear very quickly that, hey, we had to really adjust to what kind of presidency he was going to have. And so I couldn't be more proud of our efforts. You're right. We really helped lead the entire group of Democratic attorneys general. We were the first state to take on Donald Trump, the first state to beat him. And we had a victory on his last day in office on an environmental case. So from really almost literally day one to literally the last day in office, we were working hard, but working closely with other states, of course, California, New York, Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, and many other states. But I was proud that we were a leader on that. In terms of what I learned, and maybe this is a sort of a cautionary tale for why we need to make sure Donald Trump gets nowhere near the White House again, is my team did fantastic work. We won virtually every case we brought. We lost only a couple cases. That's partly due to how excellent my team is, but also the Trump administration was sloppy in how they rolled out a lot of these executive orders. And that made it easier for my team to bring legal challenges. They wouldn't always cross their T's and dot their I's. They did things in a haphazard way. I'm convinced they didn't have lawyers look at some of these executive orders. I'm concerned if Donald Trump becomes president again, that he's going to clean that up, right? And even from, they've communicated, right, what they want to do in a new administration. They're showing a level of organization that wasn't there when he first came into office. So, we need to elect Kamala Harris for all sorts of critical reasons for our democracy. But that is one more I would add to the list, is I'm just deeply concerned if Donald Trump gets in there, he'll go back to undermining our rights, destroying our environment, but doing it in a way that makes it even more difficult for future AGs to challenge successfully.
That level of organization that you mentioned, I assume you're referencing Project 2025,
yes.
and yeah, in your capacity, how much of Project 2025 have you read, and what parts of it are most concerning to you, and especially to the people of Washington? Should you become governor, what jumps out to you as something that would really negatively impact your constituents?
I mean, honestly, what jumps out to me is the specificity and the breadth on an entire range of issues, right? That they've already put pen to paper on and laid out their game plan. I mean, one thing I want to be super clear about is, within my office, we started preparing for a potential Trump administration last year. We weren't waiting around for Project 2025. Like, once it became clear Donald Trump was a likely Republican nominee, we just began as an office to prepare. That served us well when he first came into office, during that transition after his election, before he took office. The reason why we were the first AG's office to take him on is we spent time getting ready for a potential Muslim travel ban. And we started getting ready as an office. So we've been doing that, and we're not alone. We've been working with other Democratic AGs across the country on exactly this. Just make sure we have resources. Who has expertise on certain kinds of cases, certain kinds of issues? Hey, is it reproductive freedom? Who's got the expertise on that? Each office is geared a little bit differently. So for me, I won't be the Attorney General next year. If I'm the governor next year, I do believe that, I'm as prepared, if not more prepared, than anyone running for statewide office right now to be ready to help take on a Trump administration. Just given my 4 years of experience with the last administration of Donald Trump, I think bringing that expertise will help me use the tools of the governor's office, but also work with, hopefully, a Democratic Attorney General, Nick Brown, who I'm confident will get elected here in Washington State, to be a partner in teaming up to make sure we're pushing back on Project 2025 and everything else on a Trump agenda. Obviously, Kamala Harris, who, by the way, was, when I was a new AG, she was in her last 2 years as AG of California. I just have so much respect for her. Such a fantastic Attorney General, obviously an incredible VP and an incredible nominee. So I'm confident she'll win, but it's always good to prepare for a worst case scenario.
I think you're absolutely right about a lot of the dangers of Project 2025 and a second Trump administration for the country. Certainly super concerning, but I know, Washington is a pretty blue state. Even the most democratic states aren't without issues caused by Republican policies and threats to democracy. I'm curious, from your perspective, given this increasingly extremist GOP agenda, what do you think are the greatest threats to democracy, in Washington State, whether that's in the legislature or, specific policies that could affect, the environment in Washington? What do you see as the biggest threat to the residents of Washington, and how would you as governor, protect and promote democracy against some of these issues?
Yeah, and I mean, first on sort of Washington being a blue state, let me just mention that, touch on that for a moment. I know it is easy for folks to think of Washington as, hey, some deep blue state. And I can see why they think that. Democrats have controlled the governor's mansion for 40 years, right? So it'd be sort of natural to assume that, hey, as the Democratic nominee, maybe my path is clear. But it's worth pointing out in the last two campaigns for governor in Washington state, when there was no incumbent running, like this one, it's an open seat, the total margin of victory for our last two Democrat governors, Jay Inslee and Chris Gregoire, they won by a combined 3 percentage points. Combined 3 percentage points. So historically, these elections for governor, again, when there's no incumbent, are not just close, they're like really, really close. And we expect this one to be close. In terms of your specific question around a sort of threats to democracy, look, Washington has some challenges that we see nationally. I'll just give you a specific example. So in 2020, the last gubernatorial election, Jay Inslee, Democrat, running for a third term, ran against a Republican, a guy named Loren Culp. Jay Inslee won by a wide margin. Loren Culp claimed that the results were fraudulent. So this is the Republican nominee on the ballot. This is their standard bearer. And he kept saying that the results, it was fixed and ballots were counted. It shouldn't have been. You get the idea. He filed a lawsuit in court challenging the election results. So it's my job as Attorney General to defend the state. So when we got that complaint, we went through it, and our conclusion was this is frivolous. So we sent a letter to Loren Culp and his attorney saying, unless you withdraw your lawsuit within, I think we gave him 48 hours, we're going to seek sanctions against you and your attorney for filing a frivolous lawsuit. You got 48 hours. Guess what? They caved. They dropped their lawsuit with prejudice, meaning they can't ever bring it back again, right? So my feeling is anytime someone is trying to threaten democracy, question those election results in a way that is irresponsible, right? In a way that's irresponsible, that needs to be taken on. Right now in Washington state, we had in our primary a lands commissioner race decided by, I think it was like 49 votes in the primary, which made the difference between a Democrat and a Republican advancing in our top two. Predictably, the Republican Party has filed a lawsuit challenging that, right? So, we just need to make sure that there is a way to challenge elections that's thoughtful and fair, and that's a part of the process. Make sure votes are counted accurately. Then there's what Loren Culp did, right, which is wildly out of step, right? Just making up claims. You got to take the ones that are out of line, take those on head on. There can't be any negotiation. There's no room for discussion. There's got to be clear leadership on that, whether it's the Attorney General or as a governor. And so I think as a governor, you have a unique role of the bully pulpit of the office, right? To speak on behalf of all Washingtonians. And that's something I have some experience in and would certainly do as governor.
Last question for you. In addition to your career in law and politics, I know that you are a champion chess player, a game that takes a lot of skill, precision, and people reading. How do you apply those chess skills to your political life? And how has mastering a game like chess helped you understand the world of law and politics better?
Chess, yeah. So when I was a kid, I started playing chess at a young age, and I got pretty serious about it. And after high school, I did not go to college right away. I told my parents I was going to try to become a professional chess player. So I traveled around the United States. I went to Europe and played overseas a couple times. And so, I became a pretty good player. I was an internationally rated chess master. And so I was pretty serious about it. And if I had another life to live, I'd be a professional chess player. That's what I would do. I just love the game. And, you can't spend thousands and thousands of hours thinking about a subject, studying a subject, playing in tournaments, dreaming about it without it really influencing the way you think about a lot of things, including, to your question, politics. So chess, I think in some ways, it may seem odd to say, but I think is really good training for politics. I give you a lot of examples, but as one example, if you and I are playing a game of chess, my job in our chess match is to anticipate every move you're going to make, right? So when you play knight e4, in my brain, I should say, yep, I knew he was going to play knight e4. I know why you're doing it. If you make a move that I did not anticipate, that's a big problem, okay? A major problem. And that should not happen more than once or twice in an entire game. Well, what that does is, in order to be a chess master, that means you have to be very, very objective about what's going on the chessboard, right? I need to literally put myself in your shoes, in your head, to anticipate your move. There's no room for me getting caught up in my attack over here and not paying attention to what you're doing. No, my job is to anticipate each and everything you're going to do. Well, guess what? That's pretty good training for a lot of things, whether it's being an attorney general and anticipating the other side of a legal case, or in politics, anticipating, right, what your opponent's going to say, what kind of campaign ads they're going to run, how they're going to respond to this issue or that issue. And so I think being objective is something that we all have our strengths and weaknesses, but I feel like I've been, I think a reason I've never lost a campaign is I think I'm pretty objective about my campaigns, and try to instill that in my team, that we don't get too caught up when things are going well. We try to be objective about it. The other thing I just will say is that, that chess teaches of many things is that, while the person with the white pieces has a slight advantage by moving first, if nobody makes a mistake, the game's in a draw. So what that means at a high level is if I want to beat you in our game, there's often a moment in a game where I need to take a risk. I need to commit myself in a way that means I might be increasing my chances of losing the game, but I'm increasing my chances of winning as well, right? And you've got to be willing to take those calculated risks to actually beat a tough opponent. And I think chess really taught me the value and importance of calculated risks if you want to win. And so I had my weaknesses as a chess player, but that wasn't one of them. If I thought, hey, taking those calculated risks was something that I kind of enjoyed, and felt I was able to do. And in my political life, I've tried to do the same thing, whether it's as an attorney general, hey, taking on big corporations or taking on, being the first AG to challenge Donald Trump. There's a risk involved with that. A lot of people didn't like that decision, but I think you got to lean into that. If you're fighting for the people, if you feel you're on the right side of an issue, it usually involves some element of risk. There's a downside if you lose. I think too many politicians are honestly too dang cautious. I really do. I just think they're too cautious, and that's just never my personality. And so I think those are a couple things in particular that chess really taught me.
Man, that was a really interesting answer. Thank you. Thanks for explaining that. AG Ferguson, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in to today's candidate Q&A session with Democracy Docket. To stay up to date on all voting rights news, subscribe to our free newsletter. See you next time.